Okay, how's it going, everybody? So we're going to do another flip lesson here to make up for the class that I missed. So we're going to continue on with our multiplying fractions. We've been doing quite a few of those last class, and then we're going to start the dividing of fractions. Okay, so we look at these this problem here that I have on the board. What we're going to do is we're going to break it down, and we're going to try and find those ones. So what I do is I look at the top here, and I see that I have 2 times 3, and the bottom I have 2 times 5, the top I have 3 times 5, and the bottom I have 3 times 6. So when I look at these, I say, okay, what can I simplify? I'm finding the ones, right? That's what I continue to say is I find the ones. Well, the easy one that I see is right here. See that 2 divided by 2 equals a 1. And so I draw that giant 1 just like that. And then I also see that I have a 3 divided by 3 is also a 1. And then it's okay to go kitty corner as well. So I see that I have a 1 right here. And then this 6 can actually be broken down further into 2 times 3. So then if I do that, then I see that I have a 1 right there as well. So at the end it looks kind of like a mess, I get it, but if we do it step by step when we breaking down each number into its factors, what I see I have here is I have 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 for the top, so that equals 1. And at the bottom, I have 1 times 1 times 1 times 2 times 1. So then that equals 2. So that means that this whole thing, 6/10 times 15/18, simplifies down to 1/2. Okay? All right, now look at the next one. On the next one, we have to do exactly what everybody wants to do every time they see whole numbers with fractions. This is the only time that I actually encourage my students to put a 1 underneath the numerator, the 8. So you first do that, and then I'm going to break this down. So this is going to become 2 times 4. And now I just find my ones like I did before. So I see I have a 1 right there. And once that's done, there's nothing else I can simplify. I never simplify straight across, always up and down. So one numerator with one denominator. Then I have 2 times 3, which is 6, and 1 times 1, which is 1, or the answer is just 6. Okay? So that's how we multiply those by using the simplify first. Always simplify first. Okay, let's take a look at the next sheet. Okay, now what I want us to do is I want us to show what this multiplication is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write it, and this is super important. Part of your homework tonight is to write a statement telling me what this says. And same thing for division. It's really more for division than it is multiplication. But this says that I have 2/3 of a group, of a whole group, with 1/4 in it, in the group. Okay, so that's what it says. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start by drawing a group here. There's my whole. Now I have 2/3 of this. So there's 1/3, there's 2/3. Now it says that I'm going to multiply that into, inside of what I'm trying to find out is inside this group of this 2/3 of a group, how much of my 1/4 do I have in it? So now I'm going to break it down this way. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So then this says that I have 1/4 of this. So this is where my 1/4 is. Okay, so then the answer in my drawing is the place where the squares that are double colored. So this one here and this one here. So I have two that are double colored, so that's 2, and then out of my total number of squares, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that's 2 out of 12, or if I simplify that down to 1/6. Now, when you show them, you won't always get the simplified one like we would if we were just multiplying them ourselves. So now I'm going to do the way we multiply, which is to find the ones. So this can break down into 2 times 2. Here's a 1 right here. And then I have 1 times 1, which equals 1. And then I have 3 times 2, which equals 6. And so I ended up getting the same number as I did when I drew the picture out. Okay, so that's how you show those. All right, now we're going to take a look at division. Division is a little bit different. It's a much more difficult problem to show. I'm going to attempt to show it to you, but it's much more difficult, so stay with me. And if you don't understand it the first time, rewind it and watch it again. Try and figure out how I'm showing each one of these division problems. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I also want to show you guys how to do multiplying fractions with mixed numbers. So I'm not going to have you show it like we just drew it out there. I'm going to have you guys, this is the way that I'd like for you to do it. And again, when we're taught fractions, a lot of times we see mixed numbers like this. The very first thing they tell us to do is just to do the backward C, or make an improper fraction. And I only use that for very certain types of problems, and that's for multiplying and dividing. So anytime you're multiplying and dividing any fractions, your first step is to do the backward C, or to make an improper fraction. So I call it the backward C because this is typically how, if I'm going to write the letter C, I start at the top and I go to the bottom like that. I call this the backward C because I actually start at the bottom down here and I go to the top. So I know that the C is not backwards, but the way I write it is backwards. And then you multiply and then add. Okay, so that's what you're doing. So you start down here and you go in that direction and you multiply and then add. So 5 times 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22. So this one is 22 over 4, and then times. And then 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. 8 over 3. Okay, so now what I do is I try and find my ones. So I see right here, can break down into 2 times 4, and that's a 1 right there. And I don't see any other ones. So the 22 breaks down to 2 times 11, but that doesn't help me with the 3. What I cannot do, which a lot of students want to do, is they want to simplify this 2 with this 22. The reason we can't do that is because these are both in numerators. Remember, for it to simplify, it has to be one numerator and one denominator. So I cannot simplify the 2 and the 22. So then at this point, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say 22 times 22 is 44 over 3. And this is why I have my students do upwards division, because now they can easily simplify this. So 3 goes into 4 one time with 1 left over. 3 goes into 14 4 times with 2 left over, and so it's 14 2/3. Again, I did use upwards division to simplify this improper fraction. Okay, so now I think we're going to go to division. Okay, so now when we get to division, the very first thing that I want us to do is I want us to clearly write a statement about what this is saying. And so I'm going to work on writing the statements here as clearly as I can, and I'll emphasize a couple things, and then we'll actually do the problem. So when we look at this problem, what we want to think of is how many groups of 2 holes are in 6 holes. Okay, so how many groups of 2 holes are in 6 holes? So I'm just going to do my 6 holes like this. And notice that I keep saying 6 holes. I don't just say 6. It's important to emphasize the word holes on this. So how many groups of 2 holes fit inside of 6 holes? Okay. So now if I'm looking for 2 holes, well, here's 2 holes, and there's 2 holes, and there's 2 holes. So I see that I have 3 groups. I have 3 groups of 2 holes. So 6 divided by 2 is equal to 3. Okay, we're going to use that same concept for this next one. So I'm going to start with the same way. So it says, how many groups of a half hole? Because now I don't have the full thing, I have half of it. So how many groups of a half hole are in 6 group or holes? Okay, so like I did before, I'm going to start with my, whoa, I don't like that, too big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll put one more up here. 6. Okay, so there's my 6 holes. Now we're looking for halves of them. So then I would cut each one of these in half, and that's my half holes. So if I want to count half holes, I see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I have 12 half holes in 6. So the answer to this would be 12. Each one of these is equivalent to one of these up here. So each one of these is what I'm counting, because those are my halves that I'm trying to find. It says how many of these halves are inside of these 6 holes right here. How many of these halves are inside of 6 holes? So here's 1 hole and I have 2 halves in it. Here's 2 holes, I have 2 more halves. So that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay? Alright, so keep that in mind. How many holes, how many halves, how many half holes, and things like that. Alright, take a look at the next one. Alright, what this one says is, again, we'll write our sentence. How many two-thirds of a hole fit into 4 holes? Okay, so what I'm going to start with is my 4 holes. There's 1. There's 2. There's 3. Remember, these are all supposed to be the same size. And there's 4. Okay, so now what I need to do is break these into thirds. So I've got thirds there, thirds there, thirds there, and thirds there. So now what it's asking me is, how many 2/3 of a hole fit inside of 4 holes? So here is 2/3 of a hole. That's 1. That's 1 2/3. Okay, here is 2/3 of a hole. Here's a third, and here's a third. So that's 2/3. So that's 2. Here is 2/3 of a hole. That's my 2/3 right there, so that's 3. Here are 2/3, that's 1/3 and 2/3, so that's 4. Here is another 1/3, here's another 2/3, so that's 5. And here's a 1/3, and here's a 2/3, so that's 6. So now if I count how many 2/3 I have in 4 holes, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So then that means that the answer is 6. So 4 divided by 2/3 equals 6. Now, I'm going to show you how you probably would have done this on your own. What you probably would have done is you probably would have done 4 times 3 halves. So we do this thing keep, change, flip. So you're going to keep the first one, change to multiplication, and flip to the bottom, flip the second fraction. So then I can find these ones right here. And that becomes a 2, and that becomes a 1. And then I have 2 times 3 equals 6 over 1, which is equal to 6. So look at that. We get the same answer. Okay, we're going to talk more about keep, change, flip here in a minute. Okay, let's take a look at the next one here. All right, so this is the most complicated one to understand. Oh, no, it's not. The next one's the most complicated one. So we're going to write our statement. And our statement is, how many halves of a whole, and I keep going back to of a whole, fit inside 3/4 of a whole. Okay. So for this one, I don't have any holes. I only have one hole. I'm starting with 3/4 of a hole, but I'm still going to draw a hole because we always have to have the size we are comparing it to. So there's my one hole, but I want to show that I don't have a hole. I only have 3/4 of this hole. So then what I would do, like we have done, is I'm going to divide this into fourths, because this is talking about fourths. So now there's my fourths, but I want to say I only have 3/4 of this. So I have this one, I have this one, and I have this one. So now there's my 3/4 of my whole. Okay, so that's this first part, the 3/4 of my whole. Yes, that I'm starting with. Okay, then what I want to do is I want to draw another one like this. It's also a whole, but this one is in halves. Okay, so now what I look at is I say, okay, this is a half right here, which is equivalent to that half right there. So this would fit right in there. So then I have, when it says how many halves of a whole, well, inside of this 3/4, I have 1/2. So that is a 1. That's one group that I'm looking for. But beyond that, it says, well, I got this little extra here, this little extra part right here. And if I put that down here, how much of this one is it? Well, of this group, if I fill this blue in right here, then of this second group right here, which is what my groups are, is of halves, this second group right here, I have exactly half of it. So then my answer is going to be 1/2. So then I'm saying 3/4 divided by 1/2 is equal to 1.5. Now we'll do that keep, change, flip, multiply thing. So we go with 3/4 divided by 1/2. So I go keep the first one, change that to multiplication, and flip that one to the opposite. It's kind of like the keep, change, change. Let's keep, change, flip. So I have 3/4 times 2/1. And then I find my ones, and I see I have some ones right there. So that becomes a 2. So this is 3 over 2, which is equal to 1.5, just like we got right over here. All right, so that one you might need to review. I would go back to the beginning of this slide and then watch it through again. Now you kind of know where I'm going, because you need to kind of understand this one pretty well in order to understand the next slide. All right, so let's take a look at the next slide. Now what it's saying is the exact opposite. This is the trickiest one. So what I have here is, it says, how many, every time it's how many 3/4 of a group, no, I'm sorry, how many 3/4 of a whole fit into, whoa, I don't know what that is all about. Fit into half of a whole. Okay, that's the question we got. How many 3/4 of a whole fit into half a whole? So, probably you can guess what we're going to start with is our 1/2, because that's what we've always been starting with, that first number. So there's my 1/2. Okay. Now, I need to do the other one, and this is what needs to, how many of these fit inside there? So there's my 3. Okay, so there's my 4ths, right? That's my 4ths. Now I want to show that I'm going to be using only 3/4 of it. So I'm just talking about this part of my whole. That is my 1, 2, 3/4 right there. Okay, so that's my 3/4. So now, this is the part that takes some review most likely. So what I'm saying is, how much of this fits inside of there? How much of this green square fits inside of here? Well, you can see that's smaller than this. So I'm not even going to be one full group. So how much of this fits inside of there? The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to take this and color it equally down here. So I see that I have this one colored in and this one colored in. Okay, so that's my, this amount right here, these two, is equivalent to this. So how much of my green, now the key thing here is I no longer care about the blue, I only care about the green. So how much of my green square or rectangle fits inside of this red half right here? Well, you see that I only have 2 parts that are filled in. So for this answer, I have 2 parts out of 3 parts that are green, and that's the part that's probably messing up. You're like, what about this over here? This doesn't matter anymore, because this now becomes my whole that I'm comparing it to. So here is my 3 that is equal to the 3/4, and how much of this fits inside of that is right here. And so that means I have 1 part, 2 part that fit, and a 3rd part that doesn't. So it's 2/3. Okay, and we can do that doing the keep, change, flip as well. So I have 1/2 divided by 3/4, and then I'm going to keep, change, flip. So that is 1/2 times 4/3. And so now I'm going to simplify these. That becomes a 2, that becomes a 1. And then when I multiply, I get 2/3, just like I did here, I have here. Okay? So that's a tricky one. You need to go back and review that a couple of times probably to see why I'm no longer care about this extra piece right here. This is what I'm saying how much of my green fits inside of here. So then what I did was I compared it and I said, well, I only get 2/3 of my green that fits inside of there. I don't even get the whole green, only 2/3 of the green fits inside of there. Okay, the next 3 slides are just some practice problems. So what I'd like for you to do here is just to do the practice problems like we've been doing. So find your ones, do an improper fraction or a backward C if appropriate. This is the first things that we were doing in the video and at the end of last week as well. In the next slide. So here I want you to write those same statements that I was writing. So write the statement out clearly, right here. Write this statement out. Write the statement describing the problem. That's what I did every single time. If you're not sure how to write it, go back to my examples. You can use those as sentence starters if you want. And then I want you to draw rectangles to show each one of these. So write a sentence and then show. Write a sentence and then show. If you want to do the keep, change, flip to check your answer, that's certainly okay. I'm not requiring you to keep, change, flip. And then the last slide. So the last slide on this, you don't have to show it, especially this one. You don't want to try and show that. But you don't have to show it. All you're going to do is keep, change, flip to multiply. So here I'm going to give you a little bit of practice. Keep, change, flip. Okay, so that is the flipped lesson for today. I will be back on Tuesday, assuming none of my other children are sick. And I hope you have a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving weekend. And I will see you guys on Tuesday. All right, bye-bye.